Go and buy one of these things.
Yeah.
A measurement microphone. It will be your best friend. You don't have to get too technical with stuff. It plugs into a laptop. You use some free software, and within 5, 10 minutes, you'll have a far better idea of what your room is actually like. And then you can set about even just moving bits of furniture, Ed, and
Yeah.
it'll have a big effect on your room before we even touch EQ. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Phil Hinton, and in this episode, I'm joined by AVForums HiFi editor Ed Selley. And Ed, we're going to talk about, do you need room EQ for a hi-fi system? Now, room EQ, well known in AV circles, but for hi-fi and two-channel, do we need it? This is going to be a contentious. Well,
Do you know
I
what?
know
I
it's
think I'm going to really disappoint you here. I think it's going to be
okay.
less contentious than perhaps people might assume. There
Okay.
is a point of contention, but no, I don't. I'm not here to be a luddite. Just as a spoiler for how the next sort of 35 minutes is going to go.
Great. So I guess what we need to do, first of all, before we get into the whole subject, there are numerous, various different ways of EQing your hi-fi system or your home theater system. There are some big brands with their technology. So we've got Odyssey, which you'll find on Marantz and Denon equipment and other bits and pieces here and there. You'll also find Dirac. Dirac seems to be more of a cost option on a lot of
Mm.
AVRs and hi-fi and so on. You need to buy the license, but then you can access Dirac and Dirac Live. ARC Genesis. ARC is Anthem's version of Room EQ. You've also got YPAO, which is Yamaha's version. So I don't know if you get it on their hi-fi equipment or not,
No,
Ed.
it has made a small inroads.
Okay.
The RN 2000, which we reviewed a couple of years ago, and I liked very much, made use of a cut down two-channel version of YPAO. But as you're right, as it's only Yamaha, it's only when they elect to use it, and they don't elect to use it very often.
Okay, we've also got Trinov Room Optimizer. Now, Trinov, more of a multi-channel brand, not so much two-channel. But then another one which has been in hi-fi circles for a long time, that's Lingdorf and
Yeah,
their Room Perfect. So those are the technologies basically we're going to be talking about. There are other options. If you have a Roon system in your home, you have the ability to also go in and adjust EQ
mm,
and take measurements and so on. And of course, you don't need to use these room EQ systems. You can use a parametric EQ system and a microphone and a bit of free software called REW or RU. You can use that as well, take measurements of your room and then make adjustments to EQ systems or standalone EQ systems, or you can get the whole auto EQ system. So with all of that explanation out of the way,
very
I'm going
artfully
to
done, I thought. Done in not a lot of time as well.
thank you, Ed.
Kudos.
And I'm also going to put another option on here, which is forget about room EQ and get your room right to start with.
Well,
I know it's the old cliche and we keep coming back to it, but the room is the most important part of any audio system. So, Ed, I guess we start at the start and say if there are things that you can do to the room in terms of adding absorption to first reflection points or a bit of diffusion to help break up sound waves and so on. That's something that we should be talking about and looking to first of all. And it doesn't have to be fancy diffusers or anything. It can be something as
no.
simple as a book stand.
People get into mind that there's nothing between having a normal room and coating it in egg boxes and doing all sorts of unspeakable things. You're absolutely right. Careful use of furniture, careful use of wall decorations, and the simple expedience of placing your speakers with any degree of sort of optimal thought goes a huge way. I mean, you can use, as we shall cover, a number of these systems to make good on these errors. But if you don't have to correct them in the first place, you're making your life fundamentally simpler. One, you can choose pieces of equipment that don't necessarily go in for EQ. But even if you do go in for equipment with EQ, and there are cogent arguments just for why you might want to do that, even with optimal speaker placement. Fundamentally, if you can undo the problem in the analog domain, you are making your life simpler when it comes to then applying digital corrections because there is less to do. Um, My room here that I use for the bulk of AVForums reviews does not have specialist room treatment, but you can find sweeps of it on occasions when I've reviewed Dirac equipment. There'll be another set going up in the not too distant future. Fundamentally, it's a well-behaved room. I mean, I have the benefit of it being a decent rectangle shape. It is proportionally ideal. It's got concrete floors, but more sort of presciently, it's full of furniture. It's got a fat bloke in it. And there's a rug on the floor at exactly the point where reflections break, do their first bounce after coming off a pair of loudspeakers, and it makes an enormous difference. You take the rug out. I don't mean to sound like the Big Lebowski here. You take the rug out, and the room sounds significantly different. It
Yeah.
does actually, in a small and acoustic way, tie the room together. If you can do these things, even if you then proceed down a path of EQ work, you're just reducing the amount of work that the EQ system is going to have to do. And there's a caveat to why that's important, and we'll come to that a little bit later on. But yes, we've done numerous, well, say numerous, we've done at least a couple of podcasts on placement, positioning, and room items. And the forum is absolutely chock full of people doing everything from borderline egg boxes on ceilings through to just working out how to quell certain aspects of behavior. Somebody somewhere on the forums in the years that we've been doing this will have been dealing with an issue that you will be dealing with. And there is a wealth of
Yeah.
information uncorrupted by AI and other gibberish
Yeah,
that will
absolutely.
tell you how you might go about correcting this manually before you set about trying to make corrections on the equipment itself.
Yeah, there are ways and means, and there's companies out there. I think one's called Artural. I
Yeah,
see a
rings a
lot of
bell.
their advertising, which is basically artwork, which you put on your wall, but it's absorption material and so on, and it'll help with room acoustics. So, as Ed says, anything that you can do to help the room, first of all, and things like bookcases, Ed, at the back of the room, just to break up.
Yes,
Um,
books are generally speaking quite remarkably absorbent. They
yeah,
behave uncannily similar, and in an uncannily similar way to the
easy for you to
panels
say.
that you've been just
Yeah,
showing there. And of course, if you
well,
are a
just to your
turntable,
side. Yeah,
if
just
you're a
to your side
turntable
as well.
user, these, I mean, ironically, these are not in my listening room, but they are, so long as you pay a little bit of attention to where the records are relative to the shelving, they are quite remarkably absorbent. It amuses me that online you'll find a number of people who are very, very skeptical. Oh my goodness, I'm not having a good day today. Who have serious issues with room EQ, but they have
Yeah,
listening rooms that are absolutely chock full of records, and they have unwittingly treated the room
yeah.
to quite extraordinary levels of dampness, but they've just done it so subconsciously and over such a length of time that they haven't really noticed that they've been applying room treatment in a fairly linear fashion for decades and decades and decades. So yes, you don't need to reach straight for the studio refugee equipment. You can do an awful lot to improve the
Mm.
behavior of your
Uh,
room.
and you made a really, really important point there, which is don't over dampen the room.
Mm,
So I showed you those panels and stuff, and this room is fabric covered, but deliberately there's a lot of walls that haven't got any treatment on them because you still want that reverb in various parts of the room. And again, with the bookshelves and record shelves and that kind of thing, you want diffusion as well to break up the sound waves as well. So there's really a lot of tricks that you can use.
yeah,
Even a big rug, as Ed says, on the floor, if you've got hardwood floors, which I have in this room, um, you know, play around with it. See
yeah,
see what happens. And the best thing you could possibly do, and we're going to move on to EQ systems, is go and buy, it's going to do it again, isn't it? Go and buy one of these things.
yeah,
A measurement microphone. It will be your best friend. You don't have to get too technical with stuff. It plugs into a laptop. You use some free software, and within 5-10 minutes, you'll have a far better idea of what your room is actually like. And then you can set about even just moving bits of furniture, Ed, and
yeah.
and it'll have a big effect on your room before we even touch EQ.
Yes, absolutely that. Um, this leads on to a fairly sensible question, which is when we talk about parametric EQs and systems like that, and then items with Dirac and Room Perfect and other things. ultimately, there's little fundamental difference. There is one or two in terms of what these pieces of equipment are doing. The difference is purely that Room Perfect and Dirac, what you're paying for is tremendously powerful processing software to run the calculations for you and apply them. We've looked at equipment at very sensible money. In recent history, we've looked at items like the Wim Ultra. I've got the Winamp Pro under test. Literally, I've taken a break out from writing about that to do this podcast. And then items like the Eversolo DMP-88. These items have got parametric and indeed an old-fashioned graphic equalizer style EQ slider system. And they can, I mean, the Eversolos one in particular is tremendously flexible. It has a lot of fine adjustments over an extremely fine sort of band set across the full frequency response. You can get quite extraordinary responses out of it. In theory, and this is where it gets potentially contentious. In theory, they are capable of the same results that something with Dirac, maybe not Room Perfect, but something with Dirac is capable of doing. The caveat is, I'm pretty confident that Phil could sit down with his microphone and the not inconsequential levels of experience he has measuring rooms for very, very long periods of time and get those results very close between Dirac and him working with the EQ systems on these products with a microphone. What I'm going to say is that the cost extra for Dirac is buying you time saved, and it avoids you disappearing down a rabbit hole of insanity as you start trying to iron out something. You'll push down in one position, you'll get a bump in another, and so on and so forth. It's like pulling a rug with marbles underneath.
Well, it's not just that as well. You're then getting into time domain, you're getting into phase issues, you're getting it, and that's the rabbit hole that you start going down. And even a lot of experienced people in the industry end up going down rabbit holes with their demo rooms and stuff like that, because you get so infatuated by what you're looking at in terms of the graph, you actually forget what it is that the end goal that you're trying to go for. There's no such thing as perfection in anything. Even though one of the systems is called Room Perfect, there is no such thing. But it's trying to find the optimal settings for your space, where basically and it's a bit of a cliche, but it's almost like lifting a veil on your system, or one of the things I say is like taking your glasses off because they were covered in Vaseline and suddenly seeing a picture that looks amazing. It's the same with sound. It's like cotton buds out of your ears. Suddenly everything is coherent and you can hear things that you've never heard on your system before, and so on. It's not magic. It's just getting
there is a reason why Dirac has two licenses. It's got a base management license, and then it's got full spectrum, which you pay more for. The overwhelming majority of serious issues that people are going to have in rooms is with unruly bass, nodes, booms, and essentially, choosing my words carefully, if you do what Phil says and you choose a decent microphone, software, and you pay attention and you give yourself a whole day to do it properly, you can get a bass node and other sort of single points of grief dealt with pretty easily without necessarily resorting to paid software and so on and so forth.
I mean, at the end of the day, Ed, it comes down to mathematics and waveforms and so on, and it's getting your head around that. Now, you made the very pertinent point. If people don't want to go to that kind of length and that kind of hassle, and they just want something that works, this is where these systems pay for themselves, basically, because they fix all of that. If you're somebody who likes to tweak with things and mess around with things and so on, you will get the enjoyment out of looking at measurements, moving.
I need to point out that even when you've got products as sophisticated as the NAD M66, an unnamed NAD employee, because I imagine there's GDPR issues on this, they can see how many NAD products with supplied licenses, not ones where you buy licenses, ones that have the license inclusive in the price, go on to Dirac and actually start using it. And it is not yet at the 50% level. And that's for products with the license included. So we're some way adrift in reality of where a few people are in terms of their belief of the system and their employment of the hardware concerned.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts? You've heard myself and Ed go through this. What's your experiences with EQ, both positive and negative? Any tips and advice that we maybe haven't gone over in this video that you think might be useful for people who are watching this and so on? If you're watching this on YouTube, then please put your comments in the section down below, and obviously we'll pick up on those and answer those in due course. If you're listening to the full podcast on AVForums or any other product provider, then you can head over to AVForums, find a thread for this podcast in the podcast section, and add your questions or thoughts and so on. In there, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, this is a subject that we could really deep dive on. We could have gotten really, really technical. We haven't. We've kind of skimmed along the surface a little bit of this subject. Basically,
we're testing the water.
Yeah, basically just to see what kind of feedback we are getting on this, what you guys want to find out a bit more about. If you're interested in stuff like Dirac and so on, we do have interviews that we've done in the past. So you can also go to the podcast page and look up for some of the interviews. I believe the last Dirac interview we did was probably maybe 2 years ago. So you can look that up as well and go and have a listen where we do deep dive and go into it in quite some detail if you are interested in that. But that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.